Welcome, travelers. I'm Josh.
And I'm Lee Wanika, and this is Tabletop Journeys, where we will be your not-so-humble guides on the quest for RPG adventures.
Welcome, everybody, to today's episode. Very excited to be coming to you once again to be discussing the 2024 Monster Manual with my longtime co-host, Mr. Lee Wanika Miller. And I think it's time that we made it like Facebook official. The new co-host, it's a little, not, it's awkward. What is it? It's complicated.
Complicated.
Yes.
Yeah. Facebook status update in a relationship. It's complicated.
Exactly right. Yeah. Anyway, Michael Ross, gentlemen, how the hell are you? Glad to see both of you upright because both of you had issues with that yesterday.
Yeah, I am about 1,000% better than yesterday. So 1,001% today, ready to go.
I like it. Perfect.
Yeah. I was perfectly healthy yesterday, but the gods of technology decided to kick me in the ding-ding. So here we are today, hoping the cup actually works.
Yes.
And that, my friend, that was the lead-in joke you were never going to expect.
Oh, goodness. You know, this is why we don't record on Wednesdays very often. We record on Tuesday when we both have some semblance of decorum, I guess, before.
Yeah. Wednesdays, all bets are off.
Exactly, yeah.
Hump day?
Do you know what the secret to comedy is? Timing.
Timing, yeah.
It's timing.
Did I ever tell you, Holden, my older son, when he was a young child, his favorite joke? Knock, knock.
Who's there?
Interrupting cow.
Interrupting cow.
Whoa! Right. And see, this is the cutting edge analysis that you out there listen to the Tabletop Journeys podcast videos for. It's cutting edge analysis like that. But for real though, tonight we're going to go ahead and be talking more about the Monster Manual. And first off, a quick shout out to a commenter on our last video about the Monster Manual, who basically pointed out that we weren't really talking about encounter building. So tonight, we're going to be doing some monster deep dives. All of us have kind of picked monsters in the 2024 Monster Manual. We're going to do some comparing, contrasting to their 2014 versions. But we are also going to talk about some encounter ideas, or an encounter idea anyway, that we think would work for this particular monster, and kind of how we're thinking we might be able to go ahead and use it. Not necessarily specifically because of their 2024 rules, but I know my encounter is kind of a little bit out of the box. I'm kind of thinking a little bit differently, and maybe when we get to my monster tonight, you'll see why I'm thinking out of the very square, hedge-filled labyrinthine box. So yeah.
Oh, I will say, to be fair, last episode wasn't about encounter building. Like I get that the commenter was hoping that's what would be covered, but I don't think our packaging promised that's what that would be. But we are more than excited and thrilled and happy to do some of that if there are more people who are interested. Yeah. Josh alluded to it in the take that will not ever be aired, but it was a show type we were exploring on the RPG Academy for a while. I really liked the format, and it just didn't happen, but we might do a version of it here where we regularly talk about monsters and give you a couple different ideas for how you could use them. And we're going to do a version of that tonight, though we will each use our own monster rather than all three attacking the same.
Yeah, exactly.
Absolutely. The way I tend to think about it is our last episode was a basic high level overview of the new book. What our general thoughts were, some things we found interesting, some things we were going to dive into at later points. Yeah. That's really what that episode was at its core. So if you haven't seen it, go ahead. It doesn't matter the order really, but definitely, if not now, pause, then go watch that one, then come back, or finish this one, then go get that one. It'll be great. Either way, you'll enjoy that. But the goal of this one is to talk about some specific monsters and hit some of those points as far as encounter building. And I'm absolutely, as my illustrious co-hosts have said, here for it.
Yeah. let us, without then further ado, dive into tonight's. And Michael, since this episode was basically your brainchild, again, welcome to the show. We're going to start with you tonight. So,
Yes.
which monster did you want to go ahead and talk about?
I wanted to talk about the Beholder. I think there are a few monsters in the game outside of maybe dragons, and you could make an argument for Mind Flayer, that are more iconic to Dungeons and Dragons than a Beholder. It's in the traditional cover. It's on the cover of the 2014 as well as the traditional cover of the 2024 version, and it's just one of those things that when I think about D&D, that is one of the monsters that pops up in my mind. Yeah. So I wanted to do a little bit of a cross-examination of the old edition to the new. Now I'll start off by saying there's not a lot different. Like there is, I'd say 80 to 90% of it is the same with a few notable exceptions. One thing I want to mention is that the actual font in the 2024 guide is larger than the 2014, which again, as an old man who now wears glasses all the time, I appreciated that. But even with the larger font, it takes up slightly less space. And that is a general view of condensation or being condensed, I should say, that I have noticed. And I feel like, at least just from the Beholder that I really cross-examined, the condensing was moving in a more gamey aspect and away from like the ecological environmental information. Like there's still a bit, it's in there, but like when I read the 2014, it reads more like someone in the world wrote a monsters guide and was telling you about all the cool things that they are and their environment, their ecology, and they also happen to put a stat block. 2024, this is a monster you fight in a dungeon, and it is written in that way. The thing that I thought was most notable in both versions, it mentions that if the Beholder sets up a lair in an area, it can start to have an effect on the lands around it, which I actually think is a very cool thing. The 2014 was the first time I was made aware of that as type of a rule. I really liked it. I think it's a very cool game element to include. In the 2024 version, in the 2014 version, when that Beholder either is defeated and dies or has to flee from its lair, the effect that is felt throughout the land around it dissipates over 1d10 days. In the 2024, it's instant. The moment it's gone, that ends, because it's more of a game manual for a thing you fight versus a thing in the world. So that stood out to me as just sort of a theology behind what the book is supposed to do. The older version felt a little bit more like this is a book about monsters that you might experience in the game versus this is a book of monsters for you to throw against your players. Yep. Okay. It's still a CR 13 in both editions, CR 14 if it's found in its lair, because it does have some lair actions. Still has an 18 AC. Initiative is slightly different. We talked a little bit about this before we went on air. In the 2014 version, it does not give an initiative score, but you do have a dex score, so you could certainly roll and figure it out. In the 2024, it gives you an initiative score, and it is significantly higher than the 2014. So the 2024 version is going to go earlier in the round, whether you roll it or you just use that as like a passive perception sort of thing. Has a few more hit points, like 190 versus 180, which when you're getting over 150, I don't know, 10 is really not a big deal, but it is a little bit more. The stats I thought was interesting. The 2014 strength went up, or was 10, and now it's 16. And I think a big part of that is that its bite attack has a little more chomp, pardon the pun, and as well as one of its legendary actions in the new version is it can bite twice in one round. So they've decided to give it a bite attack that's a little bit beefier, and then they gave it a lair action when they can do that twice. I imagine that would combine with if it used like a charm ray or something else, a sleep ray, so that the PCs are unconscious, rather than randomly rolling another eye attack. You can just chomp and do some damage that way.
That's actually really sorry, not to go ahead and cut you off, Michael, but that's very, very interesting, because the one time that I remember fighting a Beholder under the 2014 rules, that was kind of my take, is that if you could avoid the nastiest effects of their eye rays, they weren't difficult to defeat, because it was all range. They really didn't have an awful lot that was up in melee. That's when you had to go ahead and have minions and stuff like that to go ahead and throw at them, to go ahead and keep PCs from getting too close, or like, the Beholder puts you to sleep and then minions whack on you a little bit and that kind of thing. Well, so it sounds like they've kind of corrected that, which is nice.
And that goes to what Crawford and the rest of the team over at Wizards has said about this. The goal being keep monsters at their same CR, but improve things so that they can consistently in any combat element hit that CR. And when you have creatures that have glaring weaknesses, melee or range, whichever that is, one of the easiest ways to do that is to go ahead and give them that alternate attack mode. And that sounds like the way they did it. So now it's consistently at that same CR. Michael, you mentioned the fact that it had a 14 in layer. That's something that I don't recall ever being in 2014.
No.
A thing was what it was, regardless of where it was. And it seems like that is a very unique thing. I had not noticed that before, but I'm going to be looking through the monster manual in the future to see if there are other things with layers where we get that difference. Depending on where you encounter it, it is stronger or weaker. And I think that's a really, really
because
solid
you have layer
mechanic.
actions that you would have if otherwise.
It's a very good idea, yeah, because we have talked about this on the show before, that one way to go ahead and make encounters seem harder is to introduce layer and environmental actions. And now they're basing the CR on the creature on that kind of premise, which I think is correct.
I will also note they actually gave it a move speed as well. In the 2014, it has speed of 0. It had a fly speed. It now has a speed of 5. I'm assuming that way, if there's some magical way that you can keep it from flying, it isn't completely immobile at that case. Probably would also keep it from being considered prone so that you would get advantage on attacks if you were melee. So they gave it a small speed of 5, probably to offset that. Legendary resistance, 3 a day, 4 a day if it's in its lair. Again, if it fails a saving throw, it can just choose to succeed. It can do that again 3 times, 4 if it's in its lair. Multi-attack, it could use 3 of its eye rays. That's both against same in both versions. And the eye rays themselves are the same as far as the title. So you have Charm, Paralyzing Ray, Fear Ray, Slowing Ray, Innervation Ray, Telekinetic Ray, Sleep Ray, Petrification Ray, Disintegration Ray, and Death Ray. And the way the monster would work is if you use your multi-attack, you use your eye ray 3 times. So you would roll randomly. You cannot repeat. So if you got a 10, you don't get you'd have to re-roll. And one of its legendary actions is to do an additional eye ray. So you could do 4 eye rays for your first 4 turns as the beholder if you're fighting in a slayer.
That's for real.
That is for real. Here's the big change, though. Here is the big change. In the 2024 version, many of the rays do damage as well as inflict effects. So like in 2014, if I try to I try to charm you and it doesn't work, nothing happens. 2024, I still do damage to you, even if the ray doesn't work, I think. No. Yes, no. So it's only if you fail. No, so success, half damage only. So so fail or succeed on the check, you're still taking some damage. So you are going to get whittled down. Now, not every ray does that. So like Paralyzing Ray does not, but the Fear Ray also does psychic damage, half on a save. Slowing Ray. So again, you're taking damage, pass or fail, versus just taking the effect. You add in the fact that they can do that bite attack. So they charm you so you don't run from them. They get advantage on that first attack. They could chomp you for some significant damage. I think the 2024 version is a tougher, badder version of the Beholder. The already iconic monster is going to be harder to defeat in 2024.
The Fear Ray doing psychic damage is a really nice touch. That's really, really nice. I like kind of conditional damages like that. And that's a very interesting one to go ahead and throw in.
And it's not a ton of damage. It's like 3d8, average of 13. Against a CR 13, that's not much, but it's because it's also potentially doing the other effects.
Sure.
This is sort of like a miss, but you get to do something. So I just think that's a smart development design, because if you're finding Beholder, you want it to be cool. And if they just it rolls the wrong numbers, doesn't get a good attack, what you save it could be like a walk in the park. And now you still have to do some strategery to survive this encounter.
I mean, if you're an elf on the 2014, the Charm Ray really does nothing. Like you are not so you are already, that monster's already 10% weaker on his offense because I do not care about its Charm Ray. Now, if it does 13 points of damage to me, however, now I have to worry about all the rays, and that's
Absolutely.
Which I guess Charm and Sleep. I'm immune to 2 of them if they don't do damage.
I'm gonna check this as we continue, but I think elves only get resistance, not immunity. But
Ooh,
I'm gonna check that
yeah,
out.
double check that.
In 2014, I thought they were immune to sleep and charm.
I'm saying in 2024,
Right, yeah.
I don't believe there's immunity there anymore.
Right, so
But I'm gonna
that's
confirm that.
so that's 2 changes, right? So, like, not only do I have to worry about the damage now, but I might actually be put to sleep by
Yeah.
sleeping.
Yeah, if I'm correct, we'll find that out
might be
before the end of the
terrible. Like
episode.
if you're an elf who's never had to sleep, I mean,
my
you
goodness.
could have psychological trauma from that.
Exactly,
So
yeah.
while Nika is looking, the 2014 did have a little bit more information. Again, part of that condensing of it about what their layers looked like. That is not included in the 2024 version, which I do think is a bit of a miss. I would have liked that because it talks about how they would make these dome-shaped layers that have very high ceilings because this is a creature that can fly, so it can fly to the top, be out of range for most melee, but still within the range of its eye stalks. And that's just sort of a tactic thing as far as the DM that I do think that the 2014 version did a little bit better. Both versions talk about how they are isolationists. They don't like anybody, including other beholders. Like they view other beholders as like anathema, and they will fight them instantly to the death. They love to take trophies from people they've defeated, or adventurers that try to take them over. Or when they go out and they like adventure or whatever, they love to have trinkets and knickknacks around their house. Which I actually think one of my favorite beholder encounters is not we have to defeat the beholder, but there's something in the lair we want or need. Mm-hmm. And so it's more of a heist situation, sleeping dragon, where you're a level 4 party, you will probably not survive this. Your goal is to get in and get out without it knowing you're there. So that is probably my number one encounter design tip, would be put a beholder against them way early. Then they probably can survive, but don't make it a combat encounter. Make it a skill challenge. Yep. Maybe the beholder does have some minions. There's probably some traps and puzzles, and then it's more of a, again, skill challenge to get in and out without actually waking the beast. Because if you do, you're probably going to die.
Yeah, you're gonna be
I would. Yeah, so 2 things. 2024 elves have Fey ancestry, and it reads as follows: you have advantage on saving throws to make. Advantage on saving throws you make to avoid or end the charmed conditions.
Oh, so they can be charmed.
Yeah.
An advantage against charm.
Yep, the charmed condition.
Yeah, this beholder is now way more brutal to elves. Way more.
Yep, they've basically made it that, like I said, the goal is make it hit on all cylinders, and there's nothing Michael has read that tells me it's not. Michael, the second point I want to mention, love that encounter where it's a heist at the earlier tier. One of the things they also talked about in those advertisement videos that they put together was there are different groups of monsters within a given type. So there are some lower tier creatures that tend to flow with the beholder, which makes sense for that level 4 party or that level 5 party, where they got in, maybe the beholder was doing a dream, growing another eye tyrant or something, but in that moment, their minions are out after the party, so they might have to fight those low level eye creatures or whatever. Eye bite, I think, is one of them.
Eye bite, Spectre, I think, is a slightly lower version. So there's one thing in 2014, they combined specters, death tyrants, and beholders all into one. Much like how we talk about dragons, they are all now in their own separate category, alphabetized. So they're connected, but they're not side by side anymore. All right, so here's my actual encounter. And I'm somewhat stealing this from something I read in a magazine years ago. So I'm not claiming this is a Michael original. If I don't have all the details, so if I'm half using someone else's, credit to whoever that person would be. But essentially, it would be an underground layer or inside like a mountain. It would have a central shaft that goes top to bottom, but it offsets at each level. So it doesn't go all the way top, all the way bottom, again, because we want the beholder to be able to move around in its layer pretty easily. So essentially think of it where there are going to be shafts that go off in different directions, and then a central shaft where it goes up a level, and then there'll be different directed shafts. So if you're looking top down and you can see all of it, it would look like a beholder. Big central location, and then all these little, like probably 10 different arms going off in different directions. And in all of the different side shafts, they are either crystalline or literally just have mirrors. so that the beholder can fire the rays forward or backward, and it travel up and down zigzag throughout the entire, if not the entire situation or whole, that's what I'm looking for. I won't say console, but that's not the word. The entire
complex.
That's the word I was going for.
Yeah.
At least that entire arm, that one, like think of like an eye stalk shaft.
Yeah.
But this would also give the PCs an ability to use a skill check to reposition the mirrors, either to make them less deadly or possibly reflect the ray back at the beholder. So even if you had them slightly lesser tiered, you basically give them the ability to maybe use its own powers against him. So it's not a true, 13 or 14 in that case. But at each level, it would go slightly, ajar. And then if the beholder is about to lose and wants to flee, it'll go to the top level and use its disintegration ray to burst the hole out, causing a collapse. So if the characters are trying to climb up between levels, they would have a big like 10d10 falling damage type of a thing they would have to deal with. I would make sure that my so if we wanted to up the CR, put the whole thing underwater and give the beholder a magic item that gives it freedom of movement and water breathing. So rather than walking through these shafts, they are now swimming through these shafts up and down, vertical and horizontal. So that's my beholder.
I love it. I will quote Greater Men Than I when I say that there is nothing more terrifying than a beholder in a hall of mirrors.
Mm-hmm.
That's awesome, and I love the thought that a beholder are so egotistical that it would make a lair that looks like it. I think that is a wonderfully beholder thing to do. So bravo, well done.
Thank you.
Absolutely love it. And underwater beholder, oh my goodness.
Yeah, I mean
the plans you have set in motion, Michael. The plans you have set in motion.
Give it a swim speed instead of a fly speed. And
Yep.
I mean, that's, yeah, no.
Yeah. We're going to move on because this is the rabbit hole.
I have planted some seeds.
Yes.
I will water them, let them grow, and then you get to tell me all about it.
All right. Excellent. So I'm going to go next here and talk about the monster that I want to talk about. And I'm not going to go ahead and take one of the true like iconic monsters from D&D, but it is definitely a well-known monster. And the change that I thought was very interesting in this was not just in its stat block, which is different in weird ways for me, but is also kind of conceptually. And I'm going to be talking tonight about the Minotaur. And the reason why I thought the Minotaur was so interesting was because of the way that they very much lean into the fact that the Minotaurs are the spawn of Baphomet in the 2024 rules. They are specifically extraplanar abyssal monstrosities, which is going to be very interesting, I think, as the 2024 rules get trotted out in more detail, because they were a playable race in 2014.
Yep.
And making them this tied to one of the princes of the Nine Hells and the Abyss and that sort of thing, it's going to make a very interesting it's going to make it very interesting if they decide to go ahead and make these playable. They specifically are calling them the Minotaurs of Baphomet, which I wonder is also going to go ahead and give some leverage to putting out a Dragonlance book and letting the Minotaurs be there and all that sort of stuff, right? So I think that there's some interesting choices that they made that in this book kind of pigeonholing them in this way, especially when you kind of consider the fact that they're not a playable race yet in the 2024, and that they are kind of specifically calling out like this sort of like Greyhawk style Minotaur, where it's the Minotaur of Baphomet tied to the Abyss kind of specifically. So the stat blocks are very similar in general. They're still CR3 creatures, which I actually was surprised by. I actually thought that Minotaurs were a stronger creature than CR3, but that was just, again, that's kind of like in my head canon, like where they fit. They have slightly more hit points. Basically, they gave them an extra hit die. It was as if they kind of leveled the Minotaur up. It went from 9d10 plus 27 to 10d10 plus 30. So they basically leveled the Minotaur up one if you were talking in PC terms. Their stats are exactly the same, so there's literally no change there. They did gain survival as well as perception, which I thought was a neat touch, but again, kind of not something that's going to factor necessarily into the action economy. There are some the differences are very interesting though. So for one, they're much like you saw with the Beholder getting more attacks and attacks that actually do better melee damage. The one big attack that the Minotaur gets when he used to have a great axe and now he has an abyssal glaive. The abyssal glaive now does more damage. Used to do an average of 17 and now it does 10 slashing and 10 necrotic. So again, it's kind of that split in damage type, right? Where it's like it's not just doing, so if I'm immune to slashing damage or resistant to slashing damage, even, I'm still doing a full 10 of another damage type. 1d12 plus 4 slashing and then 3d6 necrotic. So a very interesting kind of shift there where I'm giving it slightly more damage, but also kind of spreading out how that damage is done. The thing that I thought was really, really interesting was that in the 2014 rules, they've really kind of cleared up some confusion since the 2014 rules. Let me put it that way, right? Because you had the Minotaur had a gore attack and it also had the charge trait. So meaning that if they were doing their gore attack and they moved a certain number of feet, then they went ahead and did additional damage, right? But those are two separate entries in the stat block. So if I'm reading it as a storyteller, right, I'm like, okay, well, it's going to go ahead and do the gore, which is under actions, which is at the bottom of the page. Unless I look up into traits, I don't even see that charge does additional damage when I do my gore. They have now combined those into one entry in the stat block. So it says that, I have my gore attack. They've put a recharge on it, so I don't get to do it every turn anymore. And it does slightly more damage. It does 18 versus 13 in the new one. But it is right there in the gore section of the stat block that says that if I'm fighting a large creature or smaller and I'm moving 10 feet, then I do additional damage. So it's right there. It's literally like, it's like as I'm reading it, it's showing me exactly what happens when I do that particular attack. So it's much more streamlined. I think more to your point, Michael, too, where it's like the 2024 Minotaur, is something that I'm fighting this, and I will now know what this. As a storyteller, I know what to make this monster do as you're fighting it, as opposed to kind of think, okay, what am I? Okay, I did gore. Is there something else that I can do? No, I guess not. Okay, whatever. We'll let it go. So I'm like losing damage, or I'm losing tactics because if I don't know to make it move, then the gore doesn't matter. Whatever like that, right? So that was kind of one really good kind of like quality of life change. I thought they took those two kind of disparate things, put them into one stat block. I thought giving it a recharge was interesting as a kind of a balancer, maybe because it's improving the tactics and because the glaive now does a little bit more damage and because the attack does more damage. Giving it a recharge was interesting. I know that's recharges on abilities or something that Lewanika and I have been talking about when we're talking about how to build monsters in a 2024 kind of framework. So I'm intrigued to kind of dive into that a little bit more and try to piece together why I thought they did that. But the other thing that was interesting, I thought, with the 2014 versus 2024 is that there were two things that were taken out of the stat block. One of which is not super duper important from a action economy point of view, but the other one definitely is. So the first thing is that they've lost labyrinth recall, which is the thing that kind of makes Minotaurs.
Well, hold on.
Yeah,
I have a huge hot take.
Okay. All right.
Okay.
All right.
I am a Greek mythology nerd. I have not paid attention many years. I've forgotten so much, but the whole reason that the Minotaur was in the labyrinth, it was designed so that the Minotaur could never get out.
Right.
The Minotaur lived in the labyrinth and yet never figured it out. Minotaurs should not have perfect recall. They should get confused so easily. Yep. You should be able to run into like a 2-bedroom apartment and the Minotaur get lost because they should be terrible at solving mazes, not exceptionally good at it. So I am so glad they got rid of that because that is anathema to the story of the Minotaur.
Well, and I think that they're also being really clear about the fact that these 2024 Minotaurs are not your grandfather's Minotaurs. They are not the Minotaurs from Greek myth. They are not the Minotaurs that you saw in Odyssey of Theros. They're different. They are the same creature, but they are not the same creature. And I think that they're doing numerous things to go ahead and kind of elaborate on that. And one of the things is removing their labyrinth recall, right? Yep. They are not good at the mazes, right? So that's one
or at least not better at them.
Right.
Right. Yeah, fair.
But again,
right. Yeah.
I mean,
Well,
I love the idea
their
of
intelligence is 6. They're not good at mazes.
literally getting like a Minotaur confused in like a 4-bedroom apartment is a way to get away from. Like, I just think that's a great concept. It's like
that
funny,
is hysterical.
but it should work.
Yeah.
And that was like it. Honestly, this bugs me. I've been sitting on this hot take for years. I'm glad that you chose the Minotaur just to get it off. So thank you.
I like it.
Yeah.
The other one, and this one does really kind of feature into, I think, kind of both the nature of what I expect from a Minotaur, but also a pretty significant mechanical advantage that they have taken away going into 2024. They are no longer reckless. So reckless at the start of the turn, a Minotaur can gain advantage on all melee weapon attacks that it makes during its turn, but attack rolls against it have advantage until the start of its next turn. They've lost that trait altogether. So, like, that's a pretty significant debuff in a stat block that we've said that before, Luanika, that gaining advantage on attack rolls is probably the strongest mechanic, or the mechanic with the most amount of import in D&D 5.
There's a second half to that though, and that is if you are one creature versus 6, disadvantage, or those 6 having advantage against you is much stronger than you having advantage against one of them.
That's fair.
So in that regard, I actually think that's a big buff to the Minotaur as opposed to a debuff, because you are literally saving them from potentially in your average game 4 to 6 attacks versus gaining 1.
Here's the difference, though, is that keep in mind that the wording of reckless means that they get advantage on melee weapon attacks. And what does the Minotaur also do that is really super duper powerful and kind of its bread and butter? It charges and it gores you, which is also a melee weapon attack. So you're absolutely right that if I'm sitting there in the middle of 6 people, I'm not going to go ahead and use reckless to go ahead and gain advantage against one of them. I am, however, going to use my ability to hide in shadows and with my dark vision and see where they are, find them while they're sleeping, charge one, take reckless at that point, get advantage on that roll, and steamroll up hero for 20 or 30 points of damage in a single turn, and then disappear again before they even know what happened. So yes, you're absolutely correct that in the situation, I'm not going to Jackie Chan them, right? However, I am going to go ahead and pick them apart in the dark when they don't know where I am.
I had not considered the whole attack in the dark as a method. I don't use Minotaurs because I too am a big fan of classic mythology, and have really, if it's not the Dragonlance Minotaur people, which I like, has the Minotaur and all that. As a monster, I've always not particularly cared for the way the Minotaur works.
Well, so
this Encounter, I think I like.
You'll enjoy, Well, because here's the thing too, is that because and I wish to go ahead and say that that tactic is like original to something that I thought of or anything like that. It says that in the 2024 stat block, Minotaurs of Baphomet often dwell in mazes, leading their allies to hidden destinations and stalking trespassers. But then they lose reckless, which is what gives them advantage when they go to stalk those trespassers and decide to gore and charge them. It's a weird exclusion for me. In a rule set which was designed, or they said was designed to make the monsters hit harder and hit at their CR. There seems to be some interesting changes that don't necessarily do that for the Minotaur, and so I'm curious on kind of some of the methodology. I think that there's some more research here that's worthwhile.
Yeah, I think with at least this creature, you'll find that the math it comes out, even with in the situation that you described, the math comes out. GMs more often than not will use reckless because they will think hitting more frequently is better, and then they lose on the other end. So that has the net effect of diminishing where the quote unquote where it hits. When they say it hits at a level, they're not necessarily talking about does damage at a level. They're talking about, is it competent at a CR level? So that as it hits is kind of AC, it's hit points, it's resistances, immunities, it's all of those things kind of bundled. And I think if we were to ask them and they were to tell us, and they have no obligation to do so, however, please give us a call, #call your boys TTJ. We would find that they would tell us it's because the math was it hurt it more than it helped it, and so we got rid of it.
Yeah, maybe. So anyway, what I wanted to go ahead and get into, because I'm actually really excited about this encounter, because I wanted to go ahead and think outside, like I said, of the Minotaur box a little bit. I didn't want to have it traditionally be you're in a labyrinth and there's a Minotaur and it's stalking you and you're trying to get out. So instead, I started thinking about where would I place Minotaurs in front of players. At what point they're a CR3 creature. Where can I place them to go ahead and make them interesting? And so obviously there are some places in tier 1 that you could do it, but I felt like that kind of like making them like the big thing that a player is chasing after them is not actually the best use of these creatures. So I started thinking about how could other creatures use this creature? How could other creatures use a Minotaur that they either had like in thrall to them or whatever like that, right? And so I started thinking about like if you take 3 Minotaurs and put them together, that's like an easy to medium encounter for a party of people that's just at the beginning of tier 2, so around level 6 if you break out the encounter. It's probably easy, but it's kind of, again, it could be kind of swingy. It could get into the medium encounter kind of, and again, kind of depending on tactics and everything, we kind of fill in that. So I started thinking about, okay, if I'm in tier 2, what's a tier 2 big bad that I could trot out that has an abyssal nature, that is a spellcaster that can cast illusionary magic, and is a strong enough spellcaster to cast 4th level spells. Because really what I want that spellcaster to be able to cast is hallucinatory terrain, which, if you read the rules, hallucinatory terrain allows me to go ahead and create basically a horrific vision for people that is something like 150 feet on a side. So a big area where I could create, say, a nightmarish labyrinth and unleash my pet minotaurs after the party. What's a creature that does that? Well, there's a creature called the Arcanoloth, which is basically a CR 13 demon that casts 4th level spells. It does not necessarily cast the 4th level spell that I wanted it to. But it does cast things like Alter Self, which is a 2nd level spell. It casts Contact Other Planes, which is a 5th level spell. Detect Thoughts, which is another 2nd. As Dimension Door, which is a 4th level spell. Mind Blank, which is an 8th level spell. So its spell casting is kind of all over the place for one. But that's a creature, so it's a neutral evil creature, so it's not lawful. The Minotaurs are lawful evil still. This one's neutral evil, so it has some ability to kind of like play with chaos. I can imagine a kind of a tier 2, maybe not a single encounter, but a campaign built around this Arcanoloth doing something and kind of toying with the players a little bit. And its first introduction to the players, when they maybe like first enter its abyssal realm to go ahead and fight for the rest of tier 2, is that it creates this hallucinatory terrain trap for them and unleashes minotaurs at them as a way of just saying hello, and just kind of, because like I think that, again, like at the beginning of tier 2, a group of 3 minotaurs is not going to be super challenging for that party, but I can totally see how the Arcanoloth is kind of playing with the party, with its some of its beloved pets, kind of like like Ramsay Bolton sending its dogs after people, and it's kind of setting up that tier 2 set of adventures and encounters to go ahead and flesh out that part of the campaign. I thought that was a really interesting way to go ahead and use them, as opposed to how they're a lot of times used, where it's like, nope, there's a Minotaur, you have to fight it to get out of the labyrinth and call it good.
It's kind of like Mysterio in D&D.
Yep.
One thing I would suggest that would maybe, especially if this is a recurring villain, like the 2nd or maybe the 3rd time that they get into this, start dropping information, skill checks to let them know that despite it being this awful, horrific visage of a labyrinth, it's the same layout.
It's always the same.
So each time they go through it, they can maybe get further, and by that last time, get through it so quickly they avoid the Minotaurs if they want to.
Yep, sure. Totally. Yeah. Yep. So
excellent. Our question was really about how do I use a given monster, or talk about how we use monsters. And just with the first 2 encounters that / mini campaign ideas we've had, I think we've come to a very interesting bit of, we set the environment, we decide the narrative, and then we place the creatures within the narratives.
Yeah.
And then when the players interact, that narrative dictates kind of how that combat rolls, and then how those creatures jump in. And I think that's really, really strong. And hopefully I'll live up to that. I think I might have done a little bit more simplistic of one, but there's also a reason for that. I mean,
we have a variety of people listening that are different experience levels, and sometimes just the 2 goblins on another side of a ditch go is a good starting combat.
I've been saying for years that you're simplistic, Leonika, so go
ahead. He told me that all the time. He's like, well, when you meet Leonika,
he's a little simple.
I prefer to think of it as straightforward, but whatever.
He said you would say
you straightforward. All right, what monster do you have tonight, Leonika, for us?
Yeah, so in a surprising move, I did not choose any of the types of monsters that one might think anybody who's played at my table that I've ever used before. And that was honestly kind of on purpose. I chose the clay golem. I should say I have never used a clay golem in any adventure that I've run that I am aware of. There is the remote possibility that 1 or 2 may have been in some published adventures from 1E or 2E that I may have used or may have been in an adventure, but I don't recall ever using a clay golem. And if you're wondering why I chose that, it's quite honestly, I did something a little different while reviewing this book. I actually just put in my earbuds, put on my e-reader, and did household chores while the book talked to me about monsters, basically trying to absorb monster information. And I would stop and write down kind of the timestamp for something that caught my interest. And one of the very early timestamps that really piqued my interest was the clay golem. And the reason is one of its abilities, which I was like, wow, that is amazing. What a great upgrade on this creature. That is so cool. I don't know if I've ever seen any published creature with that before. Come to find out, it was always in 2014. But because I never bothered to really read it or use it or look for it, I never knew it. And I thought it was very cool. And that really plays into the encounter that I am setting up. So to talk about the character itself, how it's changed, almost nothing at all. Like literally almost nothing has changed. There are some quality of life changes. Initiative is listed. And it does seem like the initiative is the dex modifier plus the proficiency bonus is what that initiative modifier is. So in this case
is proficient in initiative, but the beholder's not. Neither's the Minotaur.
I am making an educated guess because that math actually equals the initiative score that it gets. It has a -1 modifier to dex, and it has a +4 proficiency bonus. Its initiative is +3. That says to me, those are the 2 things that are adding.
Yeah.
I mean, I might have to check other monsters to figure out if that is actually consistent, but that seems to be what they did here. The biggest change is in the abilities kind of section. It no longer is the clay golem immune to non-magical bludgeoning, piercing, and slashing because that doesn't exist in 2024. That has been altered. I don't think anything has that.
Let me ask the question there, though, because in the 2014 version, so unless you had a magic weapon, it did nothing.
Correct.
But if it had a magic item, it does full damage.
Correct.
In the new version, it still only take half damage.
Correct.
So in some ways, that's actually more powerful a defense.
Absolutely.
Because if you have the weapon to fight it, it's still an issue now.
Yep.
Yeah. Okay.
And it saves some word count. So, but they have done that with all creatures across the board. By the way, nobody has that weird dichotomy between magic weapon, magic item, magic damage, and non-magic damage. It is you are immune or resistant to the damage. Period. Mm-hmm. As far as immunities, they are pretty much exactly the same. Condition immunities versus was what it was called in 2014. Now it's just immunities. Everything else is pretty much exactly the same. All of its abilities seem about the same. I didn't really check about the damages, which I'm going to look at right now, and I think they're pretty close. But I think the damages are a little altered here or there based on the effect. But this, like Josh's monster, splits the damage type. When you're hitting with a 2024 clay golem, it's going to do bludgeoning damage plus it's
Acid.
going to do 1d10 plus 5 bludgeoning damage plus 1d12 acid damage. It's splitting those damage types. And I didn't think about it. I noted that had happened, but I didn't think about the why until Josh was talking about his monster. It's because of barbarians. If many of your monsters split their damage type, barbarians got a big debuff. Because barbarians doing half damage or taking half damage from all these types,
Everything.
But from almost everything, this is going to mean you can't just send the 2 barbarians after the beholder or who's biting them, or you can't send the 2 barbarians against the Minotaur that's kicking their ass. Pardon my language, but because that split damage type means that barbarian may only take half damage on that first part of the hit,
on the slashing,
but that bigger part of the hit, they're getting tooled. So maybe some of their magic choices are going to be that ring of blank resistance or that belt of such and such resistance. It is actually creating some more strategery, to quote Michael. And I think
things
that's
I want to
cool.
call out here. One, that acid attack also reduces the target's hit point maximum. So throughout the battle, healing is going to become less effective because your maximum is also going down with each hit. Talking about the quality of life, that actually makes it harder though on the game master because you have to track 2 different sources of damage that might have different interactions with the players. Like I don't mind it from a gamesmanship. It's fun, again, debuff the barbarians, but it is actually something that will take a little bit higher of a cognitive load to facilitate correctly in the moment of the game than just 20 damage. Oh, it's half because you're immune or resistant or whatever. So
yeah, that's a very important point. And I know I have picked up kind of a shorthand to do that when I'm at conventions, because when I play VTT, if we're doing D&D, that doesn't make a difference because I'm actually hitting 2 different buttons. And it actually says that in the change log.
Sure.
So there's no extra brain space that has to go into that when I'm doing it online. As long as I'm using the D&D tool for other online services, that might be a little different there. But when I'm doing that, when I'm running a game in person, one of the things I'll do is take note of characters' resistances or what have you. So if I have, and I will have that marked on my own little sheet, my little note sheet that I have at my side or whatever. I don't use a screen specifically, but that I would put it on that side, my side of the screen if I did. Where if character X has immunity to fire, and I know there's a fire creature at some point, I will have that on my end. So I won't bother to make that split of damage if the character doesn't have any immunity or resistance. So I only mention it for the times when it matters. So that's my shorthand.
That's still really part of your prep. You have to go into that knowing that.
Yeah.
So you're doing the work. You're just front loading it rather than in the moment, which does make sense.
Yeah, and I do it one time often at a convention. Well, at a convention I usually have pre-gen, so I will have that done up front. But even if I don't, or if I'm doing just a pickup game at the game store, that's part of my session 0 when we're getting characters and I'm writing down everybody's name that they changed the character to or whatever. I'll just say, oh, by the way, does anybody have any resistances? Oh, yeah. And then I kind of have it. So, but I've gotten very practiced at that. That's what, 6-7 years of playing D&D 5e to bring me to that point. There's a bit of a learning curve there, but so I'm glad you called that out because newer GMs, that's something they'll want to pay attention to with 2024 monsters. So with that, that's pretty much all the big changes. I really like this creature because of a very specific ability. The reason I picked this particular creature was because of one specific ability that I had never known. I never knew existed with this creature. Acid absorption is the ability. It has always been part of it in 5e. It was part of 2014, whatever. But essentially, if you do acid damage to this thing, it heals it. And I thought that was absolutely brilliant. Like, I don't think I've I think in maybe other systems I may have toyed with that, or there might have been other times where I've said that would be kind of cool, and I may have homebrewed it into a situation or two along the way, because it's not a foreign concept to me. It's just that I never really knew it existed in a published format, and I really like that, and that really informed the kind of encounter that I wanted to build. No surprise, one of my favorite classic monsters of D&D is the Black Dragon, an acid dealer. And one of the things that we talk about all the time is how do you get good minions for the big bad? This is a big creature. This is a CR9 critter. How do you challenge a tier 3 party? Give them a black dragon, a bunch of kobolds, and 2 of these.
Ugh.
That's how you challenge them. And the fact that in a black dragon's lair, every time the golem gets hurt, as opposed to targeting the player who might save versus the acid, the black dragon beefs up his golem.
I mean,
or just get everybody.
Just hits everybody.
Or
I think the black dragon has a cone attack.
Weapons, everybody, because it's not going to hurt its minion. In fact, that golem goes up against the barbarian, the paladin, and the battle master, gets tooled on. 2 things happen. One, as soon as it hits the bloodied state, half of its HP, it has a frenzy, or it's going to do a massive amount of damage. The black dragon lets it get its turn, then targets with that legendary action the golem and anybody near it. They get hurt. The golem gets stronger again and is now no longer frenzied and is ready for battle. That's just nasty. That's just nasty.
Yeah,
like that might be the way to take a black dragon tier 4, to be honest with you, because at tier 3, depending on the tactics and the preparation of the player party, that combination I just mentioned, kobolds in the wings, sniping, those 2 up front blocking, and the black dragon sitting back in command, that could potentially be a TPK if your party didn't go walk in there prepared.
Yeah, I mean, that's almost too much.
it very easily could be, but talk about one heck of a reveal, especially if the black dragon is the reveal. Like you got like 2 or 3 golems and you're fighting them and it seems like it's going well, and then the dragon rears up and you're like, oh no, and then the dragon actually hits everything with acid breath. That would be one of those what in the world just happened moments. That would be a stunner.
At least the black dragon's acid attack is a line. It is not a cone. Mm-hmm. That's like maybe the one thing that could save it, but I'd be willing to bet that your black dragon, which is it's a DC 18 dexterity save, and no, that won't work because clay golems are immune to acid damage. Oh no, but then they had that special ability.
Right. Yeah, they're immune to the damage, but they actually will heal rather than take the damage.
Right. Yeah. They don't take the damage. Yet whatever damage would have been applied becomes healing for them.
Yep. Okay. Yeah. So then I go back and say that the one thing that maybe the savior is it's a line attack, but so it can only target one. It can't do like both.
Yeah,
of them.
and maybe. Right. And so I have not put this into an encounter builder to see where it lies. It might be that tier 3 is not the spot for this. This may be the way to bring a black dragon to tier 4, because I don't think, generally speaking, adult or ancient black dragons are a tier 4 kind of dragon. But with 1, possibly 2 of these and a few kobolds, they very well could be.
Yeah. Yep, that would be that could be a disastrous combination. Are there other creatures that do acid damage?
Gelatinous cubes.
Yeah.
Much lower. That's a CR2, but you could still pair them together. Yeah. And a couple of the cubes on the field just moving through the golems as they move around would be recharging them. Definitely not nearly as deadly as the black dragon version, but that could be an early tier 1, tier 2 holy crap moment.
Why do I have this image of clay golems like riding a gelatinous cube like, slowly across a battlefield, just like a pod of them, just kind of like slowly inching across the battlefield?
Or
That's terrifying.
or perhaps you have a clay golem inside of a gelatinous cube,
Yeah.
just kind of moving around the dungeon, and a group of wary wizards think, oh, look at that, there's a statue in there, it seems to be resistant to acid, let's defeat the gelatinous cube and free the statue, and voila, they're fighting a clay golem.
There's a lot of nastiness possibility in there. I mean, even when you think about the fact that like, acid strike is like a cantrip level spell. So like if you're fighting even like a mage or like any kind of like magic user NPC, having him activate clay golems by shooting acid at the
anything that does acid, or you could put them inside like an acid factory, like that could be the environment, and there's just
like I said,
of acid.
It caught my attention, and it dawned on me that this is an amazing monster, and I can't wait to use it next.
Yeah, no, that's hot. That's hot. I like that. I like that a lot. So, all right. Anyway, so that is, that's our kind of monster reveal episode for tonight. This is an awful lot of fun to go ahead and put together. So I would love to go ahead and hear from you. I guess all three of us would love to go ahead and hear from you guys out there to go ahead and see, did you enjoy this format? Did you like the encounters that we came up with? Are there other monsters that you would like us to go ahead and talk about their 2014 to 2024 versions and then plan an encounter with them? We are absolutely open to go ahead and doing this. This was a ton of fun.
It's a lot of fun. I really enjoy it. Yeah,
absolutely. Yeah. So, hit us up in the comments down below and let us know, is there something specific that you want to see? We'd love to go ahead and do more of them. And we're going to break this apart into shorts so you can go ahead and watch the individual pieces of it too. Hope that you enjoy. Michael, any last words for you tonight?
No, just glad we were able to do this. The tech problems last week. I'm very excited about some of the stuff we've already done that people will get to see coming out over the next few weeks. But again, I want to collaborate. So if there's people who have comments that like, I want to see this, or I'd like more of that. Absolutely. I can't promise we'll do all of it, but we will do our best to provide the content people want.
Absolutely. All right, Mr. Miller, any last words for you, sir?
Yeah, I just want to say I really, really, and I know we've done it twice now during the episode, want to thank the folks that comment on our videos, that comment on our various social media platforms. That is exactly how we make things better. Yep. We are big fans and believers in feedback and constructive feedback, and that's what we want. If there's something you like or interested in knowing more about, hashtag call your boys TTJ, because we will put it into the system. Yep. We were able to pivot very quickly with this one because we were already immediately doing an episode. So it was an easy switch or an easy addition to what was already planned on the run sheet. Sometimes that may not be the case. So it might be we plan it for a future episode, but we have always tried to be and will always strive to be responsive. So love the comments. Please keep them coming in, and stay tuned for polls about what monster you would like us to do next.
Because so while there's plenty in the monster manual to talk about, this is going to be this is going to be the last episode that we do on the monster manual for at least a little while. So if you have thoughts on other things to go ahead and have in the monster manual, please leave them in the comments down below. For the next couple of weeks here, we're going to be doing something completely different. So that'll be so see, wise people out there may catch the reference. There you go. So we're looking forward to that. Anyway. Yeah, please like, subscribe, comment down below. Tell us how much you loved this. Tell us what monsters you want to go ahead and do next. And don't forget, too, that not only liking, commenting, subscribing, all those good things, fantastic ways to support the show. If you really super duper want to support the show, don't forget www.patreon.com/ttjourneys. We have levels for everybody. And one of the big things that you get for becoming a Patreon is not only early access to all of our episodes, but also you get to go ahead and play at tables with Nika and I and potential Michael in the future and all that stuff. Yeah. So, if you want to play with us through some of the encounters that we talked about tonight, www.patreon.com/ttjourneys. We appreciate you helping us keep the lights on. So, all right, without any further ado, thank you very much for listening. We will see you again next week. Have a great night.
Bye.
Bye.